Rick and Morty Season 5 just ended, and there seems to be a massive disparity in quality for episodes this season. So I thought it would be fun to rank them and go through the strengths and weaknesses of each episode. Without further ado, we have number 10. You probably guessed what would be at the bottom of the list, and it's easily Rickdependence Spray. Out of the entire show, I think this is the worst episode, which to be fair there isn't a lot of competition for that title. For Rickdependence Spray though, I think it utterly fails at what makes Rick and Morty so great. Firstly, the character journey for Rick and Morty is extremely hollow. They don't really learn anything or go through a character arc that teaches them some kind of revelation. From the beginning, I assumed Rick knew about Morty's sperm being in the horse sperm container, and he was intentionally letting everything play out just to teach Morty a lesson. But that wasn't the case, and it makes this whole journey feel pointless since our characters learn nothing, besides Morty just needing to be less horny. Then we have the contrived scenario that kickstarts the conflict, which is simply Rick being stupid. There were at least 4 moments where Rick was like, something is off, and Morty is clearly losing his composure. But Rick never figures it out. The writers even admitted the episode was contrived, and it feels like they were too lazy to cut it out of the season. Even the premise is overly crude and disgusting. Like, it would make sense if the concept of the episode was stellar and they had to have a contrivance to kickstart it, but they were willing to sacrifice the quality of writing to shoehorn in Morty's sperm taking over the world? Then also throwing in a bunch of other crap like a random underground horse society and an incest space baby? All that really overloads the episode to the point that the pace is unbearable. Then for the comedy, there were maybe a couple moments where I snickered, but a lot of the main jokes failed for me, like Blazin having the humiliating and awkward death, and all the characters acting stupid for the sake of comedy. Number 9. Gotron Jerry Sis Rick Vangelion. Really, the only strength this episode has over Rickdependence Spray is that the concept is at least intriguing. But even then, they don't really go that deep with it, and the story feels very superficial. I think Dan Harmon's quote-unquote story circle this episode is compromised because of how the characters act throughout. Everyone besides Morty feel like they are way out of character. We have Summer, who in this episode is a complete and manipulative asshole who pushes Rick into a dark place just to elevate her status in the family. Rick, who acts like a child and has no self-control, and apparently it's up to Morty to keep Rick in check now. Then we have Beth and Jerry, who are shit-talking their own children and disgracing them. Like, what the hell is happening? We go from Beth caring for her kids a few episodes prior to her hating them.
Now I gotta turn my back on you.
No!
With Morty out of the way, things were looking up.
There is absolutely no consistency, and the episode goes through a contrived manner of everyone acting out of character, just so that they can have the revelation that they need to work together as a family. Also, the whole sibling superiority conflict between Morty and Summer is really stupid and meaningless because we know that fundamentally, Rick likes Morty more, and whenever Summer challenges that, we know that Morty isn't in any actual danger. Then the whole episode is drowned out in voiceover as they rapidly speed through all the plot development. It boils down to Morty and Summer explaining to us what happens as we miss out on all the details. In essence, it shatters the rule in writing of show don't tell, and the writers fail at proper narration. Generally, the characters should not overly describe the plot or what's happening, but instead have an internal monologue as to how they feel about something. It's okay to explain the plot at some points, but doing so throughout is just lazy writing. Especially since there was barely any conflict in the episode, and the second a decent obstacle arose, it was drenched in contrivances like Rick being an idiot and trusting the anime people, and randomly introducing that Summer is taking care of an incest space baby. Also, when she was telling the story, she said the baby escaped the government compound, but then the family used it to help Rick. How the hell did they find the baby? How did they... I'm not gonna bother. So yeah, I thought this would be a fun episode, but I was definitely mistaken. Number 8. A Mortican Grickfeedy. To me, the most annoying issue with this episode is that the main plot has a repetitive joke and concept of demons finding pleasure in pain. Initially, it was funny with them enjoying the cringe of Jerry, but once they go to hell, the concept doesn't really deepen, and it stays in its simple stage of pain equals pleasure in every single moment. Then Rick comes up with a random equation to turn pain back into pain.
Dad, what is that?
An aversion-converting inversion reverter. It shoots concentrated pleasure-pain inverting shrapnel, which reverts the pleasure from pain back into the pain from pain. We're gonna kill them with 100% sincerity.
Which I guess I'm just too dumb to understand, but at least they don't portray Rick to be an idiot in this episode. This overall plot was enjoyable, and I especially liked how betrayed Jerry was, and I actually felt bad for him at times. However, this whole episode is utterly dragged down by its B-plot in which Morty and Summer try to impress Bruce Chutback by taking him on an adventure. Firstly, Bruce Chutback was just a non-character and had no character traits. So this was basically just an excuse to have an extension of the Keep Summer Safe B-plot from season 2. Except this time, the subplot takes up about half of the runtime of the episode, and the main characters practically had no input as to what was happening, so they were just watching random shit unfold for 10 minutes. That's fine for a short duration, as it was in season 2, but for half of the episode, really? Because of that, there was no real arc, proper character development, or interesting story events that occurred in all that time. Number 7. Rick and Morty Stinksploitation Spectacular. I'd say out of the lower received episodes of season 5, this is the best of the bunch. The main credit I give towards this episode is that at least the story and concept are creative, which leads to somewhat of a fun time. However, it never feels like these outlandish concepts are logically justified in the story, like Rick and the president being randomly obsessed with turkeys for reasons. It seems like the writers just wanted this wacky idea to happen, despite its completely outlandish concept being impractical within the story. Then the whole episode plays out in which Rick and Morty don't have much to do. For the entire runtime, they feel like background characters and are just along for the ride while the president is making all the crucial decisions that drive the plot. Like, in the end, Rick and Morty are literally just following around the president as if they are servants taking orders. Along with Rick getting saved on multiple occasions by the president, which makes him seem even more like a dependent background character. Then when looking at some of the main jokes of the episode, the writers constantly go for the low-hanging fruit of political jokes. Making the 10th joke bashing how stupid politics are is making me depressed, if anything. So even though the concept is cool and ambitious, as if this was some kind of superhero movie, the writing mostly deteriorates the execution for me. Number 6. A Rick Convenient Mort. So finally, we've made it to what I think is the first mostly good main plot on this list. And when I say mostly, there are some flaws that I have with Morty and Planetina's relationship arc. It seems pretty contrived that Planetina is so willing to go out with this random kid that ran up to her on the street and asked her out. Literally the only impression that Morty made on Planetina was that he recycled one can, which I guess is all you need to secure a date with her. The second issue I have with this main plot is that we see Morty essentially hit rock bottom in terms of depression, and there doesn't seem to be any lasting impact on his character from this episode. That kind of downplays the climax of the breakup, but besides that, I think the rest of the main plot was great. Two standout scenes being Morty killing Planetina's manipulative children in a twisted Avatar The Last Airbender kind of way, and the montage of Morty and Planetina's relationship declining. That montage easily bumps this episode up, and seeing Morty devastated as Planetina turns into a supervillain is tragic. Then, like a Mordecai Grickfeedy, I dislike the B-plot of this episode. It felt like filler to me and was a retread of Rick dating Unity. I do like the coordination of how both Rick and Morty hit some kind of low in terms of love, but on Rick's side, it felt shallower and more boring since they were just partying the whole time. Number 5. Mortyplicit. This was a very unique type of episode for Rick and Morty. I feel like it both excels in some areas while it falters in others. So in terms of the areas it excels in, I think the premise was a fun idea. Having this cascading ripple effect of clones creating clones, and having them all fight each other because they are scared of being hunted is crazy. It leads to a lot of great moments, and the concept of Rick's getting lazy down the line and creating clones with less effort gives the episode its much needed depth. This in turn creates a lot of variety amongst clones, and it gets pretty wild, like when a family gets captured by a deformed Rick who skins other clones to provide skin for his family, to even puppet-like clones providing sanctuary for other scared families. This episode is chock full of so many fun moments, and I think the tension escalates really well, and it climaxing with an all-out war. Now, going back to where I think the episode falters is that it lacks a consistent perspective in which we experience the story. Because the way the episode plays out is that we quickly get tossed around a dozen or so families as they are trying to figure out what is going on. In the beginning, whenever we switch perspectives, I felt like the progression of the episode was regressing because we were constantly restarting with a new family. But once the first half finishes and we get into the last chaotic half of the episode, the 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards conundrum wasn't an issue anymore. Overall, Mortyplicit was a smart, creative one-off episode that is easily rewatchable. Number 4. Forgetting Star Rick Mort Shall. It was really hard choosing between Mortyplicit and this episode because I think they are pretty similar in quality. The only difference and slight edge I would give to Forgetting Star Rick Mort Shall is that it has some solid story and character growth, which I tend to value highly when each season only has a few episodes including story progression. But for this episode on its own, I think the reveal of Morty cleaning up Rick's problems was a magnificent development, which then leads into the funny moment of Morty filling up the portal gun with Mountain Dew and getting portal fluid on his hand. As a result of that, we then have Rick getting very upset with Morty, and this essentially highlights the lowest point of their relationship. And at the end of the episode, I think it comes to a great revelation where Rick realizes how toxic his relationship was with Morty. So, on the character relation front, I thought it was outstanding. However, I personally didn't like the 2 crows direction that the writers took, and Rick being overly and weirdly obsessed with them. It felt too wacky to me, and I never thought it was believable for Rick to throw away everything for 2 crows, which does speak to the outlandish comedy of the scenario. But that's really the only thing that brings this episode down for me, because I think Morty's journey far and away outshines Rick's 2 crows journey. And come on, Morty cutting off his own hand and throwing into the guy's thigh portal to kill him was insane and badass. Number 3. Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort. One thing that this episode does perfectly that the others don't really do that well this season is the pace. It feels refreshing not zooming through random complex scenes and slowing down and focusing on one simple objective that is imbued with a cool concept. Despite the climax being a bit confusing, but that is made up for an epic ending that seems like it references the ending of Halo 3. Besides that though, I think this episode has an extraordinary balance of lore building while simultaneously moving the story forward. By having set pieces take place in the memories of Bird Person, the writers can naturally showcase events in the past without copping out with a flashback. It's so intriguing finding out all this backstory while also not being bored since Rick is actively moving towards an objective throughout the episode. That, and after rewatching Rickternal Friendshine again for this ranking, there are some small moments that allude to the revelations we figure out at the final episode. Like Rick killing these different versions of himself and one of them saying this:
Killing us won't bring her back! Thanks for the info, but I'm more on a revenge kick than a results kick.
I think that's a great detail that rewards rewatchability. Also, the direction they took the story with the revelation of Bird Person having a baby and him figuring out how Rick withheld that information for his own benefit was perfect. Number 2. Mort Dinner Rick Andre. I think this episode works so well because the stakes are drastically high for Morty because he finally is getting some quality time with Jessica. So any and all obstacles that are thrown at him feel that much bigger because of those stakes. And that being said, the obstacles that Morty has to overcome are crazy and inventive. The whole different dimension type plane where time moves faster, and Morty has to battle a rapidly advancing civilization just to get Rick and Mr. Nimbus wine is an outstanding concept. Which that then domino effects into a crazy set of events where Jessica gets kidnapped and turns into a being whose mind has transcended her physical body. In terms of flaws, there's only one small issue that's not really that big of a deal, but Rick feels neutered in this episode in terms of strength. He does get his weapons taken away, which is justified with a joke, but even when he's in his own garage, which is essentially his home turf, he still gets manhandled by Mr. Nimbus. Like, was the garage AI just munching on popcorn as Rick got the shit kicked out of him? It's just a little inconsistent when literally the episode prior, Rick had some sort of defense system when Clone Beth showed up. However though, this doesn't really matter that much since Morty is the one that takes the spotlight and his adventure was refreshing. Number 1. Rickmurai Jack. For the finale, I feel like it by default deserves the top spot purely because of how well it sticks to landing and paying off the evil Morty storyline. To me, the story development was pretty much flawless, and we finally get the long-awaited backstory for our 2 main characters. The reveal of Rick's filtering out other universes, controlling Morty and manipulating his conception, and the complete revenge-filled backstory of Rick with the company of a synthwave soundtrack was magnificent. The only flaw here is that it feels like the creators are uninterested in devoting a lot of time for canon and backstory, so they opted to do a big dump in the span of 5 minutes. And this issue connects back to the flaw of pacing in that this Evil Morty arc and backstory extravaganza takes place in just 13 minutes. That's pretty wild, and right after watching it, I felt like I needed a rewatch because of how fast it ran through the material. I wish the writer spent the whole episode on this area instead of tying up loose ends from the episode prior and doing a Rickmurai Jack parody. They could have easily saved this parody concept for another episode, but throwing it into this finale feels like they are overloading it a bit. Besides that flaw, I don't feel like it's enough to really discount the quality of the finale. The climax was epic, and I especially like the evolved and more layered version of Evil Morty's theme. It all comes together in a bombastic finale, and you're left speechless as to what just happened. It's just a shame that it could have been as good as the Ricklantis mix-up, had the episode have devoted all of its time to the Evil Morty arc. It's crazy how we can have episodes that are easy contenders for the top 10 best episodes in the series, and then others that easily make it into the worst. I just hope for season 6 that they can make the quality between episodes more consistent, but if they don't, then at least we will probably get some bangers at the end of the season. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments, and I can also do an episode ranking of the other 4 seasons of Rick and Morty.